So welcome back, everyone, to this episode of Transrational Perspectives. I am Noah Taylor.
And I'm Sean Bryant, joining from Canada.
And we're continuing our series of interviews where we're talking to people who can help us to understand different ways of looking at the further reaches of the field of peace and conflict studies and different realms where peace thinking can show up and be an asset to other types of work, other types of research, other types of teaching. So we're very lucky to be joined today by Catalina Vallejo, who is a longtime friend and colleague and has lived a very interesting journey through peace studies in different realms. And so I'd like to introduce Catalina and let you introduce yourself in the way that you like to be known, and we'll move from there.
Thank you, Noah and Sean. Yeah, so I guess the best way of introducing myself is I'm an old friend of Noah and Sean. We took our education in peace studies together at the University of Innsbruck, and that was around 10 years ago. And then also since then we became very good friends, close friends, and then we were teaching together at the program for a couple of years. And now I guess we are again in the phase of friendship after teaching in Innsbruck together. Yes, and besides that, I just moved back to Colombia, apparently. So I am Colombian. I lived in Norway for after I finished my education in Innsbruck. So also around 10 years ago, I moved to Norway, lived there for a while. Then I took a PhD in law back in Colombia. And since then, I've been living kind of a little bit in the two countries and moving around a little bit and exploring what do I do with my life and the legal training after peace studies. Yes, and I ended up studying climate change law, environmental law, climate change governance. So basically focusing on environmental conflict transformation, I guess. And now I'm back in Colombia for a 1-year teaching position at a university called EAFIT. And there I will be teaching international law and environmental law, sustainability, and trying to strengthen the environmental law area at the university. Yeah, I guess that's me.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Catalina, to start our conversation and kind of get into the meat of what we try to explore with our channel, as in the name, the Transrational Perspectives, is one of the things that I remember from your research early on, like in the level of your master's thesis, was writing about a transrational turn in law, or applying the idea of transrational perspectives to law. And from what I recall and have read of your work, this has been an idea that has kind of carried through your other work to your doctoral thesis and to even the recent article you just published. And so I want to start with that. Like, how is it that you see it in your words of what is a transrational turn in law, and what is a transrational perspective?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, and Sean really knows my research very well because he was the copy editor of my master thesis when it was published as a book. So you read every single line of it really carefully. Yes, Sean. So I studied law before, and in law I learned that it is basically a tool for social peace, right? Like we all agree on some rules or some norms for our coexistence, for living together. And the main objective or purpose of all of it is social peace. But then when I studied this master's program in peace studies, we focused on the peace part. And then I realized that the law faculty would never ever discuss what is peace. What do we mean by peace? Are there different types of peace or different meanings of peace? Do people experience peace in different ways, in different places, according to culture and history? We never really discussed that in the law faculty at the law school. And then, so I was very kind of shocked when I was presented with all these theories about peace and how different peace can be. And then in our studies, based on the work of Wolfgang Dietrich, who studied peace in history and culture, and he identified at least 5 different families or categories or understandings, interpretations of peace, and he placed law and all legal things in one particular family, which was the modern approach to peace. And then in his explanations, at least what I understood at the time, was that then it is a very violent meaning of peace or interpretation of peace, because it separates what's good from what's bad, what's right from what's wrong, and then it creates a system to sanction people who do the wrong or the bad thing. And then I was like, oh, what? So you mean you mean that I studied 5 years? Beautiful Latin American constitutional law, which is, transitional and environmental law, and on the socioeconomic rights and indigenous rights, and all these movements that happened in Latin America in the 90s. All these constitutional reforms to, seek equality in society. It was very beautiful legal transformation. And so this is what I learned. And on the constitutional rights, we all have rights, and communities have rights. So it was very inspiring, everything, and very leading to peace. And then in peace studies, I find that this is all violence. And then I was very intrigued, to say the least, and kind of provoked, I guess. So I thought I have to write my thesis about this, because I don't think, but it was provoking and hard, but also very useful to see that part of the puzzle that I never saw before. And also is like a shadow aspect that is difficult to see, and to was like, okay, also with my profession, what I've been studying and what I want to do with that, I can also be a manifestation of violence, of structural violence in society. So the thesis was a reflection about that. Okay, and what is this transrational approach to peace? So now I come to try to answer your question. So Wolfgang proposes the 5 families of peace, and the 5th family, it's kind of the integration of all other forms of peace in history and culture, and he proposes a beautiful idea of respect for different ideas of peace, and also to realize that we all experience different ideas of peace or different types of peace in different moments of our lives. And that these are more more convenient or more adequate for specific conflicts and specific moments. So it's none of them is really bad. So then I was like, okay, the modern peace and the legal peace is not that bad, but it's important to integrate it with all types of peace. And of course, with this obsession to make everything legal, which we certainly have in my country, in Colombia. We are one of the countries of Latin America with more lawyers per capita. It's crazy. Everyone is a lawyer here. Yeah, it's really, really important in our culture. So then I thought, okay, very cool. So what else can be part of the tools that lawyers, but also other people who work with conflicts or make like conflict intervention or mediators, or even psychologists, sociologists, all people involved in the humanities, how can we all use legal tools but also other tools for conflict transformation? And then from Wolfgang and the Innsbruck School, and also Castellón, Granada, the schools of peace studies, there were many beautiful tools about communication, the use of the body, connecting personal peace, inner peace with outer peace, social peace. That to see that this is not really separated, but it's part of a whole. And yeah, so I guess from there I took the key lesson, perhaps, for my life that rationality is one of our important aspects as human beings, and the law is a very clear manifestation of it. The human rights declarations and all the norms that we create, and they're really helpful. But they alone can be meaningless, or can also be used as a tool for violence, really. So involving other aspects of us as humans, like our spirituality, capacity to connect to one another, empathy, communication, understanding, intuition, even how we feel about situations, our capacity to forgive, also to let go, to move on. That is so important, no, in transitional justice, for example. Those are aspects of ourselves as people, but also as lawyers, in my case, who are really, really important for legal work. Even like for me working as a lawyer, or for me as a citizen, as a person involved also in conflicts. Yeah, so from there I really took this like new perspective or pair of glasses with me until now, which is there are more aspects of a lawyer than what we learn in law school, that just really having an understanding of the law, that exists. If this is a tool for conflict transformation, there are many other things that are important, and this more than rational aspects are also really, really important. Yes, so now I was working on the thesis that Sean copy edited was about the constitutional case on
Yeah.
objections to military service in Colombia, and so it was beautiful to see how social movements, youth groups were using different arguments on for why or why not they were in agreement with military service in Colombia, a country that has been in war for 60 years, over 60 years. So exploring all their arguments was really good to see Wolfgang's families of peace, different understandings of peace, um, and and then I just life moved and took me to the very weird field of climate change law that I really wasn't expecting that to happen. But then now I see, wow, okay, if we really have all these conflicts with nature and social conflicts about natural resources, um, this extra or more than rational aspects or capacities or talents or powers that we have are really, really important for us to think about what's happening, and also to imagine possible, transformation or solutions to this conflict. So, to summarize, after the master's in peace studies, I got a new perspective on peace, certainly, but also on law, and how law has it's important for society, but also how law can be improved and our legal practice can be improved.
I think one of the things that you really beautifully summarized, Catalina, is the the long and personal journey that you've gone on from like starting to studying law, and the maybe confusion of studying peace studies and have everything like got to question everything, and then going through some kind of period of integrating that. And it sounds like the way you're talking about your profession of law now and peace and conflict studies, it sounds like you really have integrated those perspectives. And I really liked one of the things you said, like starting off, was law as the social piece. And because I think that that in like the state of art of peace and conflict studies now, the lawyer, this is archetype of the lawyer, is either on the one camp is like that's the only way for for peace is we need clear norms and strong institutions, or the lawyer is the enemy, and we need to the social cohesion and all the grassroots things. And if you think of the higher education, the university system was always founded on three pillars of medicine, theology, and law. Looking after the body, or the peace of the body, the theology, the peace of the soul, and law as the social peace, right? The peace of society, and and so in that way, the archetype of the lawyer is the kind of an archetypical idea of of conflict transformation, or of a kind of shaman of conflict. The role is to solve social conflict. And so with all that, coming back to a question, then what do you think it took for you to integrate those lessons?
Sean, to be honest, I think I'm pretty much still integrating those lessons. It's kind of,
But you seem so confident.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but let me tell
okay.
you about the
Right.
field where I'm not so confident, and I'm
Okay.
trying to, right now, I'm in the process of trying to remember this part of peace studies to help me move through this really difficult field that is climate change law. Because it is very terrible when you study it every day, and it's very you lose hope, and yeah, it's really uninspiring. It's uninspiring. You lose hope. It's like the end is near. My friends from my PhD program, my dear friends, make fun of me because they say when I do my presentations about my thesis, it's like Homer Simpson when he goes, like the end is near. Like the end is near, and he's telling everyone that the end is near. I'm always like, you guys, there is going to be another pandemic very soon. Are you ready? All these things, because deforestation it hasn't stopped, because it's growing. So if you really go down that hole, is really terrible. And now I was hired, at this Faculty of Law at Fit University to teach environmental law and to talk about climate change law. And I've been reflecting, because I have lost hope for the usefulness of law and politics to transform the conflicts, the environmental conflicts we have, and not only climate change, by biodiversity loss as well. I'm studying also the rights of rivers, rights of nature, rights of rivers, and it's pretty terrible. It's really bad. Start to read the scientific reports, really listening to the scientists, to the biologists, to the ecologists, people who like other disciplines, which I cannot really understand well, but trying to at least understand a little bit. It's really terrible. So, and there is this new phenomena that is climate anxiety. I think maybe perhaps one of the elements was that we started to use the term climate crisis for some years already, just to, instead of climate change, climate crisis, to show that this is really urgent and important, and we need to take action, and things like structural things need to change. And so it was meant as a word to emphasize the importance of the topic and the short amount of time we have to act. But then one of the unintended effects, I don't know, this is how I understand it, is that, younger people, teenagers, children, listening to this, we're in a climate crisis, there are forest fires everywhere, animals are disappearing, plant species are disappearing. We only have 30 years to kind of understand this problem and do something, otherwise we're all going to die. They are young and they are hopeless. They are feeling like real anxiety. So it's a mental health problem. And for young people, this is new, and this is really a lot. So I find myself also in the end of losing hope, and like understanding that there is no time for the changes we need to implement, and but then it's like I'm in the hole, like kind of everything is looking so dark and bad. But then it's like, okay, complete transformation, peace, the extra rational powers, abilities and talents that we have. So it's like, okay, if I am losing hope in the law, every time after the COP negotiations, it's like, God, it wasn't enough. It's just like a lot of talk, but very little action. So it's like, okay, that's the rational part, and it's working very slowly, but also some important things have changed, definitely. But then it's like, okay, who is doing stuff? Who is doing good stuff? And then you start traveling and looking at people, like younger people, experimenting with like communities and different ways of living, managing resources, what they read, how they communicate, and it's like, maybe not everything is lost. And then it's like, oh, I remember I learned this in peace studies. So I'm trying also now to again integrate these aspects. Also, part of my research was on the Amazon, climate change governance in the Amazon. And then, of course, you have all the problems, indigenous peoples losing their lands. And in Brazil, when Bolsonaro was president, he didn't recognize indigenous rights. And then when they don't have possession of their lands, then the agro-industry is coming. And, we have like huge deforestation. And also indigenous rights violations, and so also the loss of languages, culture, practices, knowledge, wisdom, together with the land and the forest. so part of my work with climate change in the Amazon, as part of my work with that, I went to the Amazon for some weeks last year. And I was very lucky to visit a place that a guy from Bogota is managing, and he just did it. He got a loan in the bank, and he bought some land there. And his objective is to have forest restoration there in the Amazon. It's not a huge amount of land, but it's not meaningless. And so he just lives there, small steps, and he's like learning. Okay, how do you restore Amazonian? How do you say Amazonian?
Amazonian.
Yeah.
Amazonian. Thank you, forest. It's about planting trees, but not really only about planting trees, because the tree needs support to grow. The tree needs proper soil to have nutrients to grow and to stay. If you plant a tree everywhere, but there is no good soil, there is no water, then that tree is going to die very soon. So many people are like planting trees like crazy, but it's about where do you plant the tree, what's your intention really, and your understanding of the context when you plant the tree. What kind of trees grow there in that particular place? Not every tree will survive, will be good for the whole environment, the local environment. What animals live there, who will live on that tree, or who will help bring the end is near kind of situation. And then I saw this guy, doing this amount of amazing, beautiful work, and he's every day like full of energy because he's doing good stuff, also with the neighbors, with the locals. And so he's like planting seeds, literally and metaphorically. And I was like, if we knew more about this kind of people and about these possibilities, maybe we will balance out a little bit the hopeless. So I'm in that process now. Like, okay, how do I teach now environmental law in a way that doesn't, just bring all the terrible news to the students who are, 20-year-olds, trying to learn things, they are motivated, they want to do something with their life, and then it's like, bam, the end is near. No, I cannot do that. And also, like, what does it mean, to teach environmental law right now when we have all these problems, but also when now we also have other like interdisciplinary tools. What can we learn from these studies? What can we learn from psychology, for example? um, sociology, political science, ecology, very importantly, ecology. Like last week I was talking to some people in a nearby town in Medellin, like close to Medellin, and they have a small forest reservation area. So they also bought the land with their own money. They collected money and they bought some land, and they're living there, and they're growing their food, and they are doing things, and they are like committing to protect that land and to restore the land who was used for cattle before, and even like some drug dealers were the owners of the land, and they were just have a coca laboratory there. And so, it's like this tiny change after the pandemic. This drug dealer, it wasn't a good business anymore to stay there. It was too obvious. I don't know. Well, the gossip, but he just sold the land, and then these guys and women, they bought the land and they started a beautiful project. It's small, but it's so beautiful and so meaningful. And they are like group of psychologists and ecologists and lawyers, and like they studied different things. So it's very like peace studies vibe what I found there. And then from there, I got thinking I need to integrate these things into my teaching. Invite people who are doing things to show the students that things are not easy now. Things are bad. Probably they were always bad, no, in history. But like, okay, what can we do about this, and how else can we live? What are the alternatives? Like back to the moral imagination. Okay, if this is the situation, what else? How do we create ways out of this conflict? So that's kind of what I'm trying to do now, to integrate that, first of all, in me, to really, really have hope. I'm not there yet, but I hope I hope that will improve, and that and at least to have more hopeful and meaningful conversations with the students, not in a cynical way. Also, we need to know and recognize the problems that we have with nature and society, but somehow try to do it in a different style. I don't know.
I can definitely empathize with your journey. Like, I got my contract for the book right as the pandemic started. And so you spend 2 years researching every day, like all of the most terrible things that can possibly happen. And there's
while you're stuck at home,
in a compound under lockdown. And there's an initial part which was looking at what are all of the estimates on how we're all going to go extinct, and how likelihood at what time scales. And it really prompted a lot of reflections for me, because if you really believe in like pure rational hard numbers, like exactly what you're saying, you're like, man, what are we even doing? We should just like enjoy the sunset here and don't have much time left. But then also to realize it's not very helpful. And one of the things that I found quite profound was it made me reconsider
nihilism, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that I had to consider questions I kind of forgot that I had never considered before. So like I had to sit down and be like, well, can there be peace without humans? Like if we're all gone, is that a kind of peace? Or then like what is the purpose of peace itself? And I was like, I've been doing this peace studies things for a long time, but I've never really sat down and tried to write out like what does peace do? Like why peace?
Why peace?
I also want to add to just on your story about like that's the small grassroots thing in back when Noah and I studied in Costa Rica about 2007. Oh my God, was that 15 years ago? I don't remember the name of the place, but it was near the Arenal volcano, and there was agricultural land, and there was one small project where they had bought land in a riparian zone, so like along a river course, and just in that one area, like having the restoring the natural vegetation in the riparian zone, so along the banks of the stream or river, and it was just narrow bandwidth, right? Just not like the whole forest, but just this sort of strip along the side of the river, and that small area, because it was the only area the only spot in a kind of larger area that was the kind of natural habitat. All of the sort of mid-sized fauna congregated in that area because it was the viable habitat. So it was a great place to go because it was this little oasis where you'd see all the birds, like the toucans and the frogs and like I don't know what exactly species, but small caimans or alligators or something in the river. So that was I could relate because like that small project was so fulfilling to go and you see the success, right? You see that small step of success that, okay, we have one small bit of land and restoring natural habitat, and they come. They like the birds came, the animals came because that was an oasis for them. And taking that as a kind of summary of what I take you're saying, is like both on the personal level but also a pedagogical level, is needing this two directions of, we can talk about like the big questions, the top level of the law, but it also needs to be grounded in, I would call like a grassroots but also embodied experience of like being, if you're talking about climate change and environment, being on the land and seeing those small steps and experiencing what it feels like to be in a healthy living forest.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and indeed, I've been thinking that I think really, I mean, if you teach environmental law, you can teach about all the norms created to protect biodiversity, air quality, soil, water, animals, the atmosphere, the climate system. Yes, you can just give the students all the information about these norms. And these norms you really are many times are really wonderful. Like, it's not bullshit. How they are created is very like expert people thinking about these problems and creating the solutions.
So that just really struck me as funny. Like, these norms, they're not bullshit. People
Not
actually thought a
always
lot about
bullshit.
them.
The law has very bad reputation, but sometimes it's really, really good stuff in there. Very interesting. There's a lot of work by many people thinking about the solutions. And so you can feed the students all these things, and it's too much. And then there is no connection between that. Like it comes as an obligation. And then there's Wolfgang's understanding of law as a moral or modern peace manifestation, which is like you're imposed. You have an imposition of you have to do this. You have to act this way, but you really have no consciousness or of why this is important, or where does this new norm come from? What happened before this? What was the situation before? How was the legal reform process? Who pushed for this reform? Who is against these reforms? And like, is like no understanding of the context of how a legal norm is created and why it is important to respect it beyond the fear of being punished. So I think this really it's important and also a lesson from peace studies for me to work in the legal field. Like, we create norms and many other things. Like, norms are just a tiny bit of what we create in our culture and society. But that is important. It's not the only important thing, but it is important, and it is beautiful. Can be beautiful, can be respectful, can be the result of that society dialogue, communication. It can be very important, but also can be a really meaningless imposition. And I think what you say about the embodied aspect of peace or contact with nature is so important, so important. Like, of course, I've studied, the Biodiversity Convention, and I saw the COP15, what happened, but then I went to this place for a couple of days, and Colombia is the most biodiverse country in terms of birds in the world. It's like tropical. It's just like so much life. It's like sun and rain, every day, all the time,
Mm.
forever. It's a lot of life.
Yeah.
Many things happening, many animals living, dying. It's crazy, it's beautiful. So just being there and listening to the sounds of nature when you go to sleep and waking up with the birds, just going out with coffee and seeing, I don't know, 20 different birds in 10 minutes. It's so amazing and so beautiful. It's like, okay, and now I understand what we need to protect. Why it's important to, that all these skies of so many different colors stay alive, or that they don't go extinct. But if, like, in the cities, we are never really exposed so much, at least in many places, to nature, to you seeing the cycles of nature, to seeing what happens when, something changes to the water, in the water, or in the soil, how that, um, connect with changes in the animals, or, it's all connected, but we don't see it so clearly. It's very difficult, sometimes impossible to see. So I think also bringing the students to these places, just without even telling them things, just being there, experiencing nature a little bit, and not only nature, but like human community, maybe discussing some topics. But just being there, I think, will be so important and different.
And I had never really thought of it that way, but I would suppose that the vast majority of law is created in a city, just your contextual environment, and
It is.
of course it filters out that vital essence, which the embodied approach and the acknowledgement of the importance of that returns that kind of sensual nature of what it means to be a human, and why you're doing this kind of work to begin with.
Absolutely. And that's why also many of the laws that are created are not fair.
Yeah.
The fact that they are law or legal doesn't mean they're fair necessarily. They are created by us, by humans, in different contexts, and sometimes really is the view of only one sector of society, which can have a lot of truth to it, but it's disconnected from other truths, from the truths of other groups, sectors of society, different people. And so in that sense, people are convinced that this is very good, but then they don't realize how this relates to others, and then that it can be also harmful. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I find that so fascinating when I also like thinking thinking about it through a lens of mediation. That you have a norm, like a societal norm that's been more or less established, but maybe established by a not by a sector of society. And so then if you get the question of if there are people then who don't agree with that norm and or want to contravene that norm, how has that come? Like what value or importance or need that's not being met is driving this behavior that is contravening the norm? So if we say something like environmental degradation, like what is it that they're making more important than the protection of this beautiful area? And I think that also there's great importance and things like that with like the big question of democracy, and in the sense of like, well, how can you get people to want to follow that norm? Do you take the time to address the underlying need, or do you use the apparatus of the state to force them through coercion and beatings to follow the norm?
Very well said, Sean.
And Catalina, one of the things I've taken away from having read quite a bit of your work is really how using this frame of the relationship between humanity and nature, and actually looking at it and using the language of conflict in a way is quite liberating, because it acknowledges that it's a relationship. And I think that very often gets lost when thinking about the environment. And actually it gives the room for why this transrational perspective makes sense in being able to acknowledge these different elements. Because if you don't acknowledge that it's a relationship, then many of the other aspects of like looking in terms of harmony and balance alongside truth and justice don't really make sense. Have you? I wonder how your journey has been with this in realms outside of peace studies. You said in your introduction that it was seen as quite strange to even think about peace, let alone a transrational perspective in the legal world. Have you seen that change over time, or is it still seen as a very weird idea? Is it different in environmental law than it is in other areas that you've worked?
No, that's a very difficult question. I don't know if it has, because like when I wrote this thesis, I was like, wow, I'm, creating the transrationality of law by writing this. Of course not. Like when I work, for instance, with very young people, like school students, they they immediately come, with other words to the idea of transrationality. Like, of course, we have other possibilities beyond our rational capacity, and of course, we need to use it. And of course, that's the glue. That's what connects us instead of dividing us. So and also, the idea that we lawyers are humans is not very new. But to some people, it is, but but it's not totally new. And of course, if law doesn't grow on the tree, it's not a natural product. It's not out an orange. It's a cultural product. Even though many some school of thought within law disagree with this, but this is at least the understanding that I sympathize more with, that it is a product of culture, and as a product of culture, it is alive and it changes, and we are the ones who make it and use it and misuse it. And because we are humans, I mean, it's only possible that it is transrational, that the law is transrational because we are. So whatever we create is also transrational, has to be. There is no other possibility, It's not a software. And and now, no, are you thinking about softwares being transrational? No, like, but yeah. So I don't know if it has changed, or at least if it's more like we now talk more about it. Definitely, now there is more and more and more talk about law as ecological. Law as part of a whole, law as part of many systems. Like the systems theory in law as well, that the humans are not the only legal subjects, but there are other subjects as well, because we are in relationship with humans. That's why we create the law. Like basically when you have 20 people living together in a house, the first thing, common sense, is to create some basic norms. Like what time do we use the kitchen, who can do this and that, and what times, just to have some order, little bit of order, and make things easier for everyone. But then that can go really extreme, or if you can like have total anarchy, and that can also work well. But yeah, so it's a need of humans to create some norms to live together, and be more, make it like facilitate our relationships. So it's only normal that we also do the same with the other subjects that we live with in this planet. So definitely that's more and more common now in legal theory. In conferences about law, the ecology of law, law as a system, connecting with other systems, other subjects, not only the human, and also like leaving behind this idea that we are, as humans, the masters of nature. We understand it, we fix it, we do whatever we want with it. And it's more and more like, maybe not, maybe not really, like maybe really we are in a relationship with nature, because we are also nature. So I think it's definitely a more common topic now in the legal field, and also in the humanities in general. The understanding of relationships, or focusing more on relationships than on individual aspects, like seeing the web of relationships in order to intervene.
And where would you like to see it going?
Good question. Yeah, I don't know. I would like to see it going towards more a more humble understanding of the law, perhaps. and courts and everything legal. More like it is one of the tools, it is one of the possibilities we have to manage or to transform our conflicts, and it is a very, very important one. Sometimes it's the key tool, sometimes it's not, but it could be, accessory tool. It could be, you can take some tips or lessons from some, legal norm or process or jurisprudence. Sometimes it is the most important tool, sometimes it's a very accessory tool, sometimes it's not relevant at all. And just to see, to use it when it's necessary, to the extent that is relevant, to like really facilitate better relationships or communication in society. I think that's, and also I would like to see more like legal consciousness, maybe like more like improving how we understand changes in the law and the importance of law in a context, not just the way I was educated was like the state is super important. The power of the state, the power of the law. The how is it? The majesty, majestic aspect of law. Like it's something above all of us that is very like it's imposed or. But
it sounds like you're talking about like law as divine.
Yeah, but not divine in the sense of like having like true respect and admiration and inspiration from it, but more like fear. So I would love to see that change. That we don't have more of a fear relationship or a relationship with the law and legal practitioners and the state that is based on fear, but more on facilitation and conflict transformation. I think that would be wonderful, and to have a more clear space for non-humans in the law. I think that would be very cool, very important as well. I mean, which includes, of course, animals and plants, but also systems like the climate system, water cycle, like improving our understanding of how we are all part of this planet, and there is a dynamic relationship among all of us. I think that would be very cool. I guess that would be summarized in having a more humble understanding of the law or relationship.
Well, I liked one of the things you said, which to me sounds like kind of hitting on a key theme of that. You say like law is not the problem, right? Is that norms are not the problem. If you have a few people in a house, the first thing you do is set norms. But the questions are those norms flexible, and who gets to decide what the norms are, and who gets to decide what the consequences are, and those are like big human questions, right? Those are big, like philosophical, sociological questions that that ebb and flow through history and time. Right?
Yes, but also shown how, like, not to lose sight of what's the purpose behind the norms. Why are we using them? What's the purpose? And with the pandemic, it was so obvious to see how like different legal cultures use the law to like have these new regulations for COVID. Like, can we meet? Can we not? Can people go out for a walk or not? Like, do you need to use your face mask when you're alone in your car? And it's like, yes, because everyone has to use it. It's like, okay, what's the purpose? What's the idea? What's behind this? So for instance, I'm married to an Austrian man, and so during the pandemic, it was so different, and we lived in Norway at the time, so different to see how Austria related to law during COVID. It's like really they were focusing on just complying with the norm, whatever it was. It's like, okay, do you have all your vaccines? Yes. And then people were unsure if they were covered by if they were doing something illegal because they were not sure if they had enough vaccines. Like, do I need to get one more there is no more vaccination yet. It doesn't exist. You got all that exists. Like, you cannot just repeat the vaccine just to make the state happy. It's like losing sight of the purpose of things, and that's when you disconnect, like in Dietrich's terms, the law, the norm that was created within a context for relationship, with a purpose, with an intention, with like based on a need. Exactly, that's it. Based on a need. It made sense at the time, and then it may continue to make sense for a long time, because human affairs are pretty much the same always. Very well, with difference, but it's always about life, death, love, family, property. We don't change too much. So it's like when you disconnect the norm from its energetic,
from its roots, from its need.
From its need, right? From like how it emerged, why do we create, and then you have just the norm for the norm, la ley por la ley. It's like, well, then we are in deep trouble. Then we lost connection with everything, and then we are not able to change the norms when our society changes, or when that need disappeared. We cannot see that we don't need this. Now we need other things, other norms, or maybe we need less norms altogether, or we need norms in a different topic. But this topic is already, you see. So some culture really focus on just the power relationship between the ones who create norms and have the power to execute them or impose them, or create punishment for it, and the subjects of the norms. And then some other societies are more open and flexible, but more not so ordered. Yeah.
It reminds me, about 10 or 15 years ago, there was an advertisement or public service announcement on the radio about distracted driving, so not using a phone when you're driving. And it said, not only is it dangerous, it's illegal. And I was thinking, like, that's just what you're talking about. No, it's illegal because it's dangerous. Like, not the other way around, right? Like, it's illegal. It would be like someone somewhere on a legislative body decided to make it illegal because it's dangerous, and like to try to like kind of coerce into public behavior.
Yes.
For the common good, right?
Yes.
Then on that note, kind of coming to a close and wrapping things up, where do you think your research is headed in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Sean, you should have warned me about this. I could have thought about it more, No, Sean, I don't know, but I think towards, I don't know exactly how.
You can plug your next book.
Yes. No, but I think it would be definitely towards, connecting the different fields that I've been working on or interested in or learning about, which are peace studies, law, rights for sure, human rights, rights of nature, and now with more like the ecological perspective, like really learning more from ecology, biology, and then other sciences, and really trying to see how this can connect. So I think the last paper that you and Noah were very kind to, and our dear friend Paula, very kind to read and comment. It's a project on the rights of nature. So I was invited to a network of people working on the rights of nature from different perspectives. So it's not only lawyers. So there's some lawyers, but mostly activists, also artists, also scientists, fiction writers, who are very important in all this. And yes, so different kinds of people. And they asked us to write a short essay about the rights of nature from, whatever perspective we wanted to. And I was a little intimidated, to be honest, to write about rights of nature from the legal perspective because I'm new in this field and I'm learning from great people. And I was like, what can I say about, rights of nature from a legal perspective that is interesting or new or, that is not just a repetition of things I'm reading to learn. And I was really seriously intimidated. Like, I have nothing new to say. I mean, if maybe in 10 years, after seeing many things and going to places and talking to people, I could have my own idea to share. But I felt like I didn't have my own idea to share. And then I was like, okay, but there must be something I can share. Also from peace studies. Of course, my voice is important. I have something to say. And then I was like thinking more like, what can I say? And then I thought, probably the most meaningful thing I can share is a connection between rights of nature and peace studies, conflict transformation. And I was like incubating the idea for some days. What can be said about this? Made some notes and wrote an essay that I share with you guys. And it will be coming up maybe this year. So I think when I wrote that essay, I was like, this is really what I wanted to do for such a long time. Like, finally come to write about the integration of peace studies and legal studies, but in a really meaningful way, more than just saying, yes, law is a tool for social transformation or conflict transformation. Like, in this, like, now we have these environmental problems that are so huge, and as Noah said before, like, maybe seeing it as a conflict we have with nature, it's a way of seeing new things in this, and also of using tools that we already have for conflict transformation. So I don't really know. I mean, I just wrote like a basic, like, initial idea of how this could be integrated, and I would love to continue thinking about that. Thinking about like the ecology of environmental conflicts or something like that. I don't know but it's like the integration of law, peace studies, and ecology, maybe.
That sounds like a wonderful direction to be going.
Oh, thank you. I will be asking you guys.
Yes, always happy to
be there to bounce some ideas.
Of course. Good. So I think we should find
Catalina, thank you so much for your time and for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Not just your work and your research, but your personal journey too, about how you've come to where you are in this stage of your life and career.
Thank you so much, Sean and Noah, for this invitation. It was fun to talk to you, and also it really makes me think much more about where I'm going with all these, or what can be useful, and also how to integrate this into teaching. So it's also very useful for me.
Wonderful, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Yes, please invite me. So when that article that you commented is out, we can maybe discuss
round 2. Perfect.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I never know what to say for the very last line.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye.